So I'm going to show you a clip and then we'll have a discussion about this. This is going to YouTube as well. So hi YouTube, I'm hoping you're going to enjoy this one as well. So this should be interesting. So let's listen to Harada talk about AI capabilities for future fighting games.
ただどちらかというと進化の方向はちょっと僕は違う方に考えていて、一つのキーワードは AI。AI はこれ何かというと、2つの方向性があると。で1個はね、そのユーザーの入力補助と言っていいのかな。今一生懸命プレイヤーっていうのは自分の出したい技とやりたい戦略っていうのを一生懸命自分で頭で組み立てて、それを一生懸命手で伝えて、しかも相手の動きを見ながら対応しながらこうやってコントロールしている。ここが、格闘ゲームの面白さでもあり、逆に言うと難しさの原因でもある。これをね、もう少し補助することで間口、お客さんの層を広げることが可能だと思っていて、単純に難しすぎるコマンドっていうのはなくなったんだけど、それでもみんなっていうか多くの新規層にとって格闘ゲームの入りにくさっていうのは、自分が思った時に思った技を出せない、もしくは、なかなか技が覚えられなかったりする。で、気持ちは先行するんだけど、こう自分の手から伝わって画面で起きることがちぐはぐになると、ここが非常にストレスになる。で、これをどう解消するかっていうのは、一つ AI はあって、どういう AI かというと、いわゆるそのプレイヤー個人の、癖、だったり、例えば入力の動向を見て、でおそらく多分今のコマンドでここでこういうことをしたいはずであろうっていうことを必ず先読みでずっとリアルタイムに読み込んでくれてる。でそうするとそれを、ある程度感知して、例えば、当然、ガードが自動でできてしまうとか勝手に技が出るってことはないにしても、その人の操作に合わせてやっぱりある程度の、ここで本来このコマンドであったはずであろうとか、ここで本当はダッシュを入れたはずなんだろうけども、この人が焦っていておそらく、うまく2回目のレバーが入っていないとかいうのは補完してくれるっていう。
Okay, so this is quite interesting what he had to say here, right? So here's going to be my take. This guy's a genius. I studied computational linguistics, and I'm familiar with machine learning and what possibilities we have, and I do think this is absolutely reasonable to assume and to be doable in the future, having an assist AI like that. Now, this idea is actually very unpopular. I went to event hubs to read the comments on this, and people universally agree this is a bad idea. I'm not 100% sure that this is in fact just a bad idea. The problem that we need to solve in the future at some point is accessibility. And people will argue, well, if you're a competent player, or like if you take the time, then you will learn to play the game, right? Which is absolutely true. But I do think there is a major problem when it comes to fighting games compared to other games. Other games can actually hide the difficulty much easier compared to Street Fighter. If you play any MOBA game and you want to do your ultimate attack or whatever it's called, you literally just press a button, right? And Street Fighter does not, or fighting games, they work differently in this regard. If you see something cool and you want to do that yourself, if you see, oh, this Shoryuken looks cool, this attack looks cool, this critical art move looks so cool, and then as a beginner you try to execute it, you'll realize it's actually not that easy. This is why we had games like Rising Thunder, right? Rising Thunder was trying to solve that problem by introducing special moves with one buttons, right? Basically remove the execution barrier, because essentially it's not really about the execution in the first place. I do think you lose something important in the process, but it's interesting, right? Because one way or the other, like, you're losing something if you don't have it. If your inputs are complicated, then casuals will flat out not give the game a try. If the inputs are too easy, then competitive players will complain about the game being, well, not rewarding practicing execution, right? So this is a major problem that needs to be solved, and I'm not sure if you can solve this problem. I think no matter how much you simplify a game's input, there will always be, or casuals will never like a game like Street Fighter because they will lose if they're casuals, and it's really easy to lose it in a game like Street Fighter if you don't put in the time, right? So I think this is a fundamental issue that will never be solved compared to team-based games, for example. Because in team-based games, if you lose, then you can always blame the team, right? Because you always play perfectly, obviously, right? But the team sucks, so you can't win if your team sucks. It's basically an option select that you can choose to go for that removes your, that makes it so you don't have to take responsibility for you sucking. You can suck and still enjoy the game, because if you win because your team happens to be good, then you can always claim it was because of you. You can literally not play the game and still win a match in a team-based game, right? Something similar is actually true for Battle Royale games. If you check out any game that functions like this, if you hide for long enough, then you can actually get a decent score. You may not be able to legit win, but you can be in the top 5 or something like that. So you can have a positive experience even if you don't know anything about the game. This is simply not true for fighting games, and I'm not sure if this will ever be solved. And I don't think AI will solve this problem, because if you think about it, what's the point of having a fancy AI help with your inputs if you can just solve the problem with simplified inputs? You can even make it optional, right? I don't see how you fundamentally change the game for a beginner if you choose to give a simplified input scheme for beginners that they can choose to go for, or the real thing, right? If you give them that option, you kind of remove the necessity to have an AI work on your dash timing, or okay, not dash timing, but still combo potential, right? If inputs are too difficult and you don't know how to get them through. I really wonder how this AI would work in the first place, because punishes, if you miss a punish, I mean, you kind of have to attempt the punish for the AI to think you're going to punish. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of ridiculous. Imagine you block a move and the AI automatically punishes. That would be kind of stupid. There is a new Core Gaming video about command inputs. I have not watched it yet, and I'm sure it's going to be interesting. I'm assuming the video is going to be about how command inputs give you certain things that are missing when you remove them, like visual cues, for example, for a fireball. You know, for example, that your opponent has to duck before he can do a fireball input, right? Which is why you can actually bait people by repeatedly ducking and standing up. Like if you duck and then you stand up with a jab, for example, you can bait your opponent into jumping. And that's because people know if you want to do a fireball, the opponent has to duck first. So there are some visual cues that you gain through inputs. Also, having a more complicated input for a more damaging move makes a lot of sense as well. Having CAs be more complicated to execute than other special moves makes a lot of sense, and adds something to the experience, because if you make everything one button, then the reaction speed for everything will become the same, which I think is it's actually a subtle thing. It won't make that much of a difference on low level, I think, but for competitive play, it's absolutely different. So yeah, it's quite interesting, this whole topic of adding an AI. Maybe this should be done for beginners as an option that they can actively choose to go for. But then again, once they actually compete and they remove the this hand-holding mechanic, I'm not sure. Maybe it's actually gonna cause a situation where people are even more frustrated, because then they realize the stuff that they've been doing just doesn't work. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. The video touched on the nuances of motion versus charge. Oh yeah, right. I mean, you have that difference as well, right? Inputs different, but you can solve that with a simplified scheme as well, right? Because you can still have guile And Guile honestly kind of has a very simplified scheme. He has additional restrictions, which is an interesting concept, but I don't think that concept is really popular with beginners. What if the AI becomes useless if they are good at the game and only helps beginners? I don't know how this is supposed to work. Here's the thing. What does that even mean? Let's say you have a buffer like in Street Fighter, right? And you missed to punish your opponent because you pressed your attack too early. And then the AI steps in to punish your opponent properly, even though you mistimed something. For competitive play, this is a horrible idea because you're supposed to get punished when you make a mistake, and now you have an AI that actively corrects your mistake. So how far is the AI supposed to go in that instance? And I think the answer to that is really not that simple. I think the AI would probably just do things like give you a DP when you slightly miss the input. Yeah, but should it? That's the question. Is this an additional system that will be turned off for competitive play? Because if you don't turn it off for competitive play, then you get into a situation where you don't get punished for a mistake. And I think that's a fundamental aspect about fighting games. If you make a mistake, you're supposed to get punished. SF5's input system is very lenient already, right? So you could argue, well, people shouldn't be missing those inputs anyways because it's so lenient. And I agree, I don't think we need to have it any more lenient. At some point we can argue, well, if you missed that punish because you have that many frames, that's on you. You need to practice your timing, right? I really don't think this should be something that competitive play should be. Like, it just sounds wild to me that you miss a punish and the AI will get that punish for you, and then you win a tournament off of you making a mistake but getting corrected by an AI. That sounds really stupid. The question is, does that actually help beginners? And I think this is where you could really argue one way or the other. Do beginners actually get less frustrated if they have an AI execute things for them if they're less proficient at execution? I don't think this is easy to answer because I think they will just find other stuff to complain about. There's no way to turn a casual player into a competitive player. I truly believe this is the case. So what you have to do is you have to have content for a casual player that is enjoyable, regardless of whether they're, regardless of the fact that they're not interested in competitive play. And in my opinion, the answer really is have a separate mode. I've talked about this a couple of times already, but I just don't believe it's worth investigating ways of turning casuals into competitive players. It's just not worth the effort, and usually what it means is you're sacrificing competitive play to get people interested in a mode that they naturally just don't enjoy. You don't magically enjoy competing if you're a casual player, right? Because that's what you need to do. Like, you need to remove the competitive element from versus mode in order for casuals to have fun. Is that worth it? I don't at all think this is worth it. So, and I think Street Fighter V is a perfect example of that. Street Fighter V is a game that struggles a lot, specifically because, hilariously, it struggles because of input leniency, right? At least it's part of the problem, right? The inputs are slightly more lenient, and people think this is a no-skill game all of a sudden. So I think the viewing experience suffers as a result, and competitive play suffers as well, because, well, people like GamerB have stated you can't stand out in Street Fighter anymore because you can't pull off combos that are difficult, because there are no difficult combos. So the question becomes, is it worth sacrificing that for players that won't enjoy versus mode anyways? And I think this is where we get into a topic where it's really tricky to judge. Like, what do you even do with casual players? How do you make the game fun for them? And I do think you need separate mode. You need to have good single player modes. if you're gonna have a competitive mode or a 1 versus 1 type of mode, then make it fun for casuals by adding random elements. Like in Smash, this will solve with items, for example, right? It's a lot of fun for casuals to play Super Smash Bros. And as a result, funnily enough, it has a reputation of being a party game because you can actually play it at a party and everyone is gonna have fun no matter how good the player is. And this is something that I think Street Fighter 6 needs to address as well. Street Fighter just isn't fun for casuals, and I don't think making the input system easier solves that problem. I feel like forcing easier inputs or AI on everyone is not going to solve anything. Casuals want to have fun with little effort, meaning combos, and feeling like they can win. A new fighting game should have baby combos that look fancy and get you some wins as well. Here's the thing, you need to fundamentally remove execution as a barrier. The Shoryuken input is too complicated for beginners, they can't execute it. So if that's the barrier, then I truly think like you need to separate the regular versus mode from what casuals are looking for. If you're gonna introduce one button Shoryukens, then let it be a separate mode or a separate option that people can choose if they wanna play baby Street Fighter, essentially, because they're giving something up in return, right? And once they're ready, if they're still interested after doing that, they can at some point be like, okay, I'm gonna take a look at the real thing, right? I think this is a legit option that people should be thinking about. A new fighting game should have baby combos that look fancy, right? As well, the game should have optimal combos that require time to learn more complicated inputs and timing. But Street Fighter V already does that, by the way. The concept of introducing simple combos that are not optimal and having more difficult ones that are optimal already exists in Street Fighter V. The target combo for Ryu was specifically designed like that. It's a non-optimal way of comboing for Ryu, but it's accessible. So clearly this is not good enough. The only reason we even care about accessibility is so that casuals will buy a game so they can drop it 2 to 3 months later. Exactly, but the question is, how do you make it fun within those 2 to 3 months? And I think, I really think if you introduce one button Shoryukens or one button critical arts to Street Fighter 6, and that's like the default, then I think the game is gonna turn to shit. You're fundamentally altering how the game functions and what the game is. I remember I'm not sure who said that, but there was apparently a legit discussion within Capcom to turn Street Fighter 4 into a turn-based game. So basically, if you do that, then you remove execution entirely, right? So that's a legit option that really scares me, by the way, to remove execution from being a variable that casuals struggle with. But the problem is, you don't have a fighting game if you do that, right? You actually turn into a completely different genre once you make it turn-based. So, yeah, I do not like that at all. I agree, Jimmy, if that's the case, you're better off playing Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It's interesting, right? It's an interesting discussion, and I'm not quite sure what the solution is. Just having single-player modes. I mean, there are some games like Mortal Kombat, for example. This is something that I've said a couple of times already. Games like Mortal Kombat, for example, they will never be regarded. They will never be played or bought because of the competitive element to the game, which is unfortunate, but it's just a problem with the marketing with Mortal Kombat. So what you can do with Mortal Kombat is make sure your fatalities look as good as possible. The visual presentation needs to be top-notch, and you need to have single-player content for people to enjoy, right? I think that's like the most important element to sales when it comes to Mortal Kombat. Even if you have a good competitive game like Mortal Kombat 11, we can still see that it's being dropped very, very early. It doesn't seem to matter that the game is supposedly good competitively. I think Street Fighter is one of the very few games that actually established itself on the idea that it's a competitive fighting game. You buy Street Fighter because it's a fighting game, because you want to fight in this game. right? This is actually a major accomplishment for the Street Fighter brand itself. It's not that easy to achieve that, since it's not a particularly accessible. It's not accessible having a 1 versus 1 fighting game. Casuals have a hard time, getting fun out of that. So yeah, how do you solve that? Interesting question, right? With an AI? Potentially. I mean, if you think about it this way, if you introduce a simplified scheme to your Shoryuken, then the player playing will never learn how to do a regular Shoryuken, right? But an AI, if it corrects your inputs just slightly, maybe you'll get closer to the real thing quicker. So maybe it is a good idea. I'm not quite sure if that's actually going to be the case or not. I think Tekken has shown how to use, I think Tekken 7 with one of the more recent patches where you can take a look at a replay and the replay will actually show you where you missed a punish. I think this is a big one. This is a big one, not just for casuals, but for anyone. If you're a casual player and you're frustrated with the game, and then you get the option to watch a replay of a match that you just lost and you have no idea what happened, or even worse, this is what happens to casuals usually. The opponent spams one move that they have no idea how to deal with, and they die getting wrecked by that one move, right? This is usually a situation where a player might decide that the game sucks and they will drop the game. Now imagine if there was an option to take a look at the replay and have an AI point out how to deal with that situation instead. And Tekken already introduced something like that to Tekken 7. So I think in Street Fighter 6, this would be an interesting one. But funnily enough, like, I used to have this idea that we need to have more tutorials to teach casuals how to play the game so they don't get too frustrated. It turns out, I think if you have, the better the tutorials are, the more frustrated the casuals could potentially be, because the difference between them and players who are actively looking to get better will be even wider, right? I can't even decide whether this is a good idea. On paper, it sounds like a good idea to say we need more tutorials for casuals. But if a casual, and this is really a definition problem, who's a casual? A casual player is generally not very interested in, well, going to training mode and practicing stuff to get the entertainment that they bought for 60 bucks, right? They want to be entertained right now. They want to have a good feeling right now without having to solve problems. That's the last thing that you want to do, or that some people don't want to do after they come back from work and they're stressed out. They want to turn on a console and have fun, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. And for competitive players, solving the problems and getting better, the journey to becoming good is the fun. But for a casual, this is not true at all. So I really wonder, if you add a tutorial mode, will this even make sense for the type of players you're trying to help? The answer is potentially not. Teach them through the story mode, make mini games in the story mode. Yeah, but then you're making the... There's a reason why there are so many cutscenes in story modes. It's because you purchase the entertainment for 60 bucks, you press the button, and then you're going to be entertained. Usually the story mode is very, very simple to complete. And it's specifically because casuals don't want to learn something. It's really very simple. They want to do something, they want to feel good about themselves. And if you shoehorn like tutorials into the story mode, I don't think at all that makes sense. I think it needs to be a separate mode. Like, there needs to be a get good mode where the game gradually introduces more difficult concepts and you needing to execute them. I think Skullgirls has a good tutorial mode that works like that fundamentally, right? It's just that I'm not sure if it actually helps casuals or if it makes it more frustrating to them. Because if you add accessibility to knowledge, then competitive players will make use of that knowledge, but casuals not. So casuals will go to versus mode or online, a ranked mode, and they will get absolutely annihilated. Even more so, right? Because more competent players are going to be there. But yeah, maybe the solution is really to add a better separation and make it harder to smurf. Maybe anti-smurf modes are going to be more important. I think this is one way you can use AI as well. Have an AI take a look at your win percentage and dynamically decide in what rank you should be in. That way you can have you don't even need an AI for that. If you have like 20 wins in a row in Rookie League, then chances are you don't at all belong even close to that rank, right? So I think there could be a lot done in that regard. But yeah, now we're getting really like a bit off topic. I found this concept of AI, machine learning, using that to make execution easier interesting, because it really there are a lot of questions that I have regarding that and how useful this is going to be. Anyways, that's going to be it for my thoughts. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please let me know in the comments down below. What do you think of the concept of using AI to make future fighting games more like easier, and whether or not this helps casual players at all. So yeah, YouTube, take care. I'll see you soon.